But what is the most powerful is when you invite customers into a story, when you position yourself as the guide and not the hero of the story. You make your customers the hero of the story, because at the end of the day, we're all our own hero of our own story.
Welcome to The Creator's Adventure, where we interview creators from around the world hearing their stories about growing a business. Today's guest is going to show us how to properly position your brand story. Hey everyone, I'm Brian McAnulty, the founder of Heights Platform. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, we're here today with Macy Robison. She is the director of certified guides for StoryBrand, where she helps equip hundreds of StoryBrand marketing guides and agencies across the globe with the tools and training they need to build the business of their dreams. As a marketing and personal brand strategist, she has been responsible for helping clients launch New York Times bestselling books, reach millions of followers across their social media platforms and email lists, and produce podcasts with a combined 4.5 million downloads. Macy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So my first question for you is, what would you say is the biggest thing either that you did or you are doing that has helped you to achieve the freedom to do what you enjoy?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I think the biggest thing I did was to just have some courage and faith in myself and what I knew. I feel like I'm kind of an accidental entrepreneur. I'm now working full time for StoryBrand, which is the certification I acquired to kind of kick off running my own marketing business, working with personal brands and authors. But I'd been a teacher, I'd been a photographer, I'd done all these different things, and felt like this was a path I really wanted to follow to help people figure out what they were good at, figure out how to build a business around their intellectual property. And it really was just making a decision and taking a chance on myself. I think a lot of entrepreneurship, even if you don't maybe consider yourself an entrepreneur, is just making decisions and continuing to learn and move forward. So I think that was the biggest thing, was just saying, no, I'm going to go for this. And one thing has led to another, and it's been a really, really great journey.
Great. I like that. So can you start by sharing then like your journey from, I think like originally you were becoming a teacher to becoming director of the certified guides here at StoryBrand. Like how did that whole process work? If you could sum up all those years
Yeah,
and everything.
for sure. I actually, my degree in college, I started out as a musical theater performance major and then switched to music education. Got my master's degree in music education and taught middle school choir for about 13 years. Really loved that. Loved my students. Had a chance to stay at home and hang out with my kids. My oldest is now a junior in high school, but kind of took a step back from that and had started photography, and that sort of became its own business. That's where I started learning a little bit about marketing and how to get people to be interested in what on earth I was doing. And then I, as a byproduct of running that photography business, learned how to build my own website. Had taught myself a lot of things about marketing and courses, just having taken a whole bunch of them, and had some friends who were authors who just asked for my help. So started doing that on the side and found I really loved it. And then ended up in a marketing role for an event, a women's inspirational event. And that's when I ran across StoryBrand. I was having a hard time trying to come up with the right words to talk about this event and the problem that it solved for the women who would come, and they loved it, but getting new people to come was really tricky. So took the StoryBrand online course and realized we just needed to have a clearer message. So we sat down and came up with a better website header, had a buy now button on our site, and doubled the number of tickets that we sold that year just from those two quick changes that we made. So that was enough to convince me that this worked, and kind of started out on my own as a marketer after leaving that event company with an author that's, in the thinkers 50. She's a thought leader and an author, but she just really had the hardest time talking about what she did without going into a huge story that kind of made people's eyes glaze over. So we went to that live event, and I became a guide shortly after that. Had my own marketing consultancy for about 6 years, and a year ago was asked to become the director of the program. so that they could have someone directing the program who had also been in the shoes of the folks who were building their own marketing businesses. So that was a little longer version than I normally tell, but that's the whole path. And I think, every single thing you do ahead of, if you look back, you can see the way the paths have turned and shifted to get you to the place where you are. And, I love teaching. I love helping people progress and grow. And I love co-creating with them. And all of the things that I love about the jobs that I've had have all had that aspect in them.
Yeah, it's great. I like the point that you mentioned about the clarity with all the message and understanding because like I always say, like people will never buy what they can't understand. And
Absolutely.
like think about it, like what's the last thing that you bought? Have you ever bought something and said, I really don't know what this is, but I'm about to spend money? You don't do that. You have to
Nope.
understand it very clearly. It's only then
Yeah.
that you go and make that decision to buy it. And also, like we've talked about before on the show, how it's common for a creator to really like you're passionate about whatever it is you're teaching or selling, and you might be more passionate about it and into it at a deeper level than your potential customer is. Your
Mhm.
potential customer may get there, but they're not there quite yet. And so, yeah, you don't want to just go on and then their eyes glaze over and you're all of a sudden at this point that they have no idea what you're talking about anymore.
Right.
And so, yeah, that the clarity and simplicity in all of that will get them to the next step. So then later you can teach them and help them understand enough that they want to know all of that other information.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
really all about building a relationship. We talk a lot about there being a gap of knowledge. Lee Lefevre talks about that in one of his books, that you are an expert at what you do. You understand this at a 10. And the people who are buying from you, well, really anyone who's buying, this applies to anything. Like you said, you don't buy things you don't understand. People buy at a 1 or a 2 as far as their knowledge goes. And we've just got to overcome that gap of knowledge with something. And it's the way that you talk about the products and the services that you offer. And in this case, the course, you have this level of expertise that's vast enough that you chose to become a teacher, chose to create this content to help people in their path and their journey. But they don't know, they're not there yet. They're sitting over here at a 1 or a 2, and you've got to meet them where they are. You've got to get over to where they are so that they want to buy. Because there are so many there. If you look at products in the marketplace, it's not the best product that wins. It's not the best course that necessarily sells the most. It's the one that people understand the best. And so you could have an amazing course, an amazing product, but if people don't understand what it's going to do for them and what problem it's going to solve for them or how it's going to help them transform, they just won't buy it.
Yep. Yeah, we always say you got to sell the result, sell the transformation,
Yep.
and leave out the buzzwords, the fancy explanations and all that. That's not what resonates with the person who wants to buy it because they're not buying it because they want to learn a specific thing. There's a reason they want to learn that thing, and that's what you have to sell.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, okay. I want to get more into that, but before, like, I think like the path that a creator takes is really important and really interesting. So like you shared some of that already, but how would you say like your background in education influenced like your approach to marketing and where you're at today?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know if anyone's ever asked me that before. I think the way it's influenced me in 2 ways. One, in the kind of work I like to do and how I like to do it. And just a reminder that I always love to be a teacher first and helping people progress. So the idea that they're going to transform is a really compelling one for me. I love seeing that transformation. I'm the person that like is always crying at a graduation when you see, the kids singing the song at the end. Like I love seeing that transformation, them thanking their teachers and their graduation speeches. Like that stuff has me crying all the time. I really love seeing that transformation, and that's been a big part of it. I also realized kind of midway through my marketing consultancy business that I love working with one to many, like being able to teach me to a group of people. Like I usually had 90 kids in my room. That was a really great thing. I loved that. And I also loved the opportunity to work with some people one on one. So that affected the way I structured my business. I had, did things on social media, tried to teach one to many as much as possible. And then had a couple of people that I would have on retainer that I could really pour into and be with them and help them grow their businesses over time. So some of the folks that I've worked with that, have hit the New York Times list, or I've helped them launch their podcast and that's grown. Those are the folks that I really love working with one-on-one. I was a choir teacher. I taught private voice lessons after school, and then had, all the kids in the room during the day. And that was probably the happiest I was in my work as a teacher, and tried to find a way to put that into the marketing work I was doing as well, as far as how my business was structured.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's important for like every creator to kind of consider their background and what they've been doing, because often
Mhm.
like the pieces will eventually come together into what you're working on now, and that kind of also shows you like where your strengths lie.
Yeah.
And like I know for myself, like I wouldn't be doing exactly what I'm doing now with Heights Platform if I didn't do a bunch of things before that led up to that, with like building, started as a web design agency, then tried doing these other digital products and things like that. And like so that kind of uniquely positioned me to like have the experience to build this software product and know like why I'm building it, what it needs to do and all of that.
Yeah.
And if I was someone who had just started out and said like that this is the first thing I was going to do, it just wouldn't be the same. And I don't know if it would be nearly as successful as maybe it is today, because I didn't have those past experiences. So I think it's important to like recognize what you did in the past, even if you feel it doesn't directly connect to you're doing now, because it most likely does in some way relate to your strengths.
Yeah, that was the surprise for me. I remember like being kind of unhappy with the way things were going in my business, and realizing like it really took that step back and reflecting on when was I the happiest, to figure that piece out of like, I like working with a couple people in a deep way. And I like, everybody else, like, let's just teach you what I can teach you and go from there. And also just being able to work directly with the individual, like that co-creative process is really important to me. I was looking at creating an agency where I was going to be working with some moms that I know who wanted part-time work, who were good writers, who'd stepped away from the workplace, and was starting to build that out, and realized like I was going to lose the opportunity to work one-on-one with the authors and thought leaders that I really loved those relationships with, and that co-creative process with. And, it didn't feel right. So pivoted again and kept moving.
Got it. All right. So I want to go back into like the kind of marketing now. So what
Sure.
is story-based marketing, and could you explain how that approach differs from maybe more traditional marketing methods, and why you think it's so effective in today's landscape?
Sure. Narrative marketing, my colleague, Dr. JJ Peterson, he is the head of StoryBrand. He wrote his dissertation on the effectiveness of narrative marketing. There's several different kinds, but when it comes to the message that is the core of what you're sharing, that narrative marketing that tells a story, measured the effectiveness of that, specifically the story brand marketing framework. But he found that it was the most effective, first of all, and it was most effective when you implemented that marketing. So if you came up with a clear message, and then the more you put that in your pieces of collateral, the more effective that was. And I think the reason it's so effective is to what you alluded to earlier, that we love transformation. We love seeing a transformation. That's the thing that people buy. That's the thing that they're looking to solve a problem. They feel not great about where they are now. They can see where they want to become. And that narrative transportation in our marketing, if we can invite them into a story and show how they can transform with our product, with our service, it's really compelling. I think the other reason it works really well is story is one of the things that really cuts through the noise in our brains, just from a neuroscience perspective. When we're watching movies, we don't daydream very often like we do when we're doing other tasks. That story engages us and keeps us interested and keeps us wanting to know what's going to happen next. So when we can utilize that, invite customers into a story, make sure we're sharing like what's helping them survive and thrive, and making sure we're clear, it just really compels the human mind to act. And so I think that's why it works so well. Certainly, there are marketing tactics and strategies that we layer on top of that message, but at its foundation, we're inviting customers into a story of transformation, and it's really, really a powerful thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Yeah, the story itself is what like bridges the gap and makes that connection between like this is the thing that you want, and here's here's the explanation of like the thing that makes it interesting of how you understand how you could get there.
Yeah. And I will say too, like when you hear story-based marketing, I think one of the mistakes that people make is they think they have to tell their story as the creator or their story as a
Mm.
company. But what is the most powerful is when you invite customers into a story, when you position yourself as the guide and not the hero of the story. You make your customers the hero of the story, because at the end of the day, we're all our own hero of our own story. And if I come to someone's website and they're just telling me about how great they are or about how great their product is, I'm looking for a guide. I'm not looking for another hero. So I'm going to go somewhere else and disengage and go look for someone who can guide me to the transformation that I'm hoping to achieve. So, if your listeners remember nothing else, just remember that. If you can position your customer as the hero, if you can make sure the story you're telling and the marketing language that you're using talks about their hopes, their fears, their things that they are worried about, and invites them into that transformation, you're going to see a huge, huge increase in the amount of people that want to come work with you.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, that's a great tip. So for those who are struggling with like clarifying their own brand's message,
Mhm.
let's say like for the part where they want to describe the story of their brand, realizing that what you just said is really important, what would you say to help a business kind of better articulate their unique brand story?
Yeah, what we usually do is start with what's the overall transformation you're hoping to help this customer achieve. They're going to go from what to what? Are they going to be a more empowered leader, a more confident business person? What is the transformation? And once we know what that is, then we can go back and say, okay, what does my customer need? What do they want to get to that transformation? And what's the problem that's getting in the way of them getting that thing? It's really based on the hero's journey. If you think of any movie, there's a character at the beginning that's ill-equipped. He doesn't know what he wants. That's our customer, and there's something that's keeping him from getting what he wants, and then a guide shows up with a plan. Um, Dumbledore has a plan for Harry Potter. Obi-Wan Kenobi has a plan for Luke Skywalker. We show up as the owner of the company, as the course creator, with a plan for them to help them transform into that thing they want to become. We also give them a call to action that's clear, and then we make sure we show them what success looks like and what failure could look like if they choose not to act, because at the end of the day, it's up to them. So that's that's kind of a quick overview of the 7-part framework that the StoryBrand brand script is made up of. And if you want to, take a crack at filling out your own, there's a book called Building a Story Brand that's great, but we also have a free tool. If you go to storybrand.com/brand script, you can start to play around with this and figure out what pieces of the story go in these different parts that weave together into a narrative that helps clarify your message for your customers. I think the biggest thing, though, like I said, is just remembering that you're inviting customers into a story. They have a problem that they need solved. You have the solution. And if you can give them a plan, and you show up with empathy and authority, we want to make sure as a business owner, as a course creator, that you let your customers know that you understand where they've been and you have the knowledge to help get them to where they want to go. But that's a little bit different than showing up on a website and talking about how great you are and how long ago you wrote your course and that you love long walks on the beach and all of those things. Like, that's not going to help me necessarily solve my problem. It's a good thing to talk about later when they're in a relationship with you, because I think marketing is a relationship building exercise, but when you first meet someone, they want to, if you think about when you meet someone for the first time, if you show up and just tell them how great you are, they're going to lean back. We want to invite them in and show that we're interested in them and their problem and show that we have a solution and can solve it. So
Yeah,
that,
yeah, there has to be a reason that they would care to be hearing
absolutely.
that.
Yep.
That makes sense. So this might be more of a complicated question to try to be able to explain like quickly on a podcast here, but let's say like I figured it out. I'm gonna build this story for my brand. Then like where do I tell that? Where do I show that? Is that gonna be like the homepage of my website that's describing that? Is it like
Yeah.
in my social media? Is it everywhere? And if it is everywhere, then like how is it different, and how can I continue to create content about that? Because I would imagine that some creators might be concerned and say like, okay, well, I figured out the story, but like after I've said it, like that's it. Now what happens? How do I continue to create content and promote myself?
No, that is a great question. And the answer is yes, you use it everywhere. But there are, if you look at the brand script on that URL I shared, there are 7 different parts, and each of those parts can be shared in different combinations throughout your marketing collateral. What I like to think about is, where is this piece of marketing collateral going to show up in the relationship I'm trying to build with that person? So, we have a tool that we create from the brand script called a one-liner, which is when someone asks what you do, instead of hitting them with a job title or giving them an overcomplicated explanation of what you do, you can say something like, most people have here's the one for StoryBrand, for example. Most companies have a hard time talking about what they do in a way that's clear. We have a 7-part messaging framework that allows you to clarify your message so that your business can grow. So it's problem, and then your solution, and then the result. And that helps people become more curious and lean in. So that's one way to use that message. Those are 3 different parts of that,
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
framework.
actually, I want to interject here quick to say
Yeah,
like that's really powerful because it also like what you just said, you could go to anybody off the street and tell that to them and they would
yep,
understand as well. And like
absolutely.
I remember like early on in my business, like even when I was just doing like web design and things like that,
Mhm.
somebody would ask me what I did. I would try to explain it, and I realized like they're not technical at all. And so I would end up defaulting to something that was much more simpler and just say I help
Mhm.
people make websites or something. But I
Right.
couldn't really share what I was doing, and because I wasn't dissecting it like that to be able to say like the problem, result, and like what we're actually building. And so I think anybody listening to this, if you feel like, oh yeah, that's me too, then definitely give this some thought of how you would describe yourself in that one liner.
Yeah, it helps people lean in. It helps them remember what you do. It opens up a conversation that's more based in curiosity than just like we're making small talk. And it just starts that relationship and that path. You're going to be more memorable. If I want to have a conversation with someone on an airplane, if I'm not ready to have the conversation, I give that answer of like, oh, I'm in marketing, But if I'm open and want to have a conversation, I share my one liner, and it always sparks a conversation. And even if they're not someone that I can do business with, they're going to remember me, and refer me, in the future, because we remember people based on the problems that they solve.
Yeah, well, that's
And
what I was
we,
going to say. It's so powerful for referring people
yeah,
because when you can describe it so clearly that anyone can understand it, then that person can go and say, "Hey, Macy, actually, she does this,"
hmm,
and they can go tell somebody else who might be a potential customer of yours.
yep, yep,
And if somebody goes and you tell them this more complicated thing and they're just not really getting it, then how are they going to go and tell that to somebody else? And if they do, they may not be telling the right person. And all of a sudden, let's like, so for me, a comparison thinking back, then like we shifted more from like a website to like a web application, like kind of thing that like Facebook or Heights
hmm,
platform where it's this software that's building something. And so if that's what we're focused on, but then somebody goes and says like, oh, they do websites, and then somebody contacts us, hey, I've got referred to you of this person. Can you do a website for like my landscaping company or something?
hmm,
When at the time we're doing this web application, it's actually not our customer anymore.
right.
And so then even if you're still getting a referral, it's not the right referral. Whereas if it's clear, now you have people can go out there and actually be selling your brand for you.
That is exactly how it works. And the great thing that's powerful about it too is if you have folks on your team, they can also memorize this one liner. You can put it in your social media by like your profile at the top. I've had it in my email signature. It just helps people memorize what you do. Marketing at the end of the day is really an exercise in memorization. So even though we don't love to repeat ourselves, if we can repeat ourselves with clarity, people start to memorize what we do, and they're drawn to clarity and away from confusion. And it just really helps you cut through the noise and make sure people are paying attention to you. And as far as other places to use that clear message, I think the next best place to use it is a website. Because if people talk to you and they want to know more about what you do, the very next place they're going to go is your website. And if that is confusing experience for them, that's not clear, they're going to disengage. So we like to say a website header in particular should pass the grunt test. You should be able to hand a laptop to a caveman and have him understand what you do, what you sell, and how I can get it. And it should be that clear at the top with very little competing clutter at the top of that page. And then they scroll down and can learn more and can continue, understanding and getting enlightened about what you do. We have another tool that might be helpful to your listeners. If you go to storybrand.com/makeover, it's one of my favorite tools that we have. It's a video series called 5-Minute Marketing Makeover. And Donald Miller, who's the author of Building a Story Brand, walks through some really great suggestions that you can start to apply to your website right away. The ones I mentioned earlier with my events company that I worked at, having a buy now button in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, or schedule an appointment, or whatever your direct call to action might be. When we look at a site, our eyes scan kind of in a Z formation. So, they go from left to right, and that upper right-hand corner is really prime real estate that's usually filled with something that doesn't compel our potential customers to take action. It doesn't mean they will, but they at least know where it is. Like I can walk into a store, not expecting to buy anything, but I still know where the cash register is. So I kind of think of that button in the right-hand corner as the cash register. I know where to check out when I'm ready. And then, that really clear language at the top helps me understand if this is the right thing for me, because it's sharing what you do, it's sharing what problem you solve and how I can get it. So I think that's the next best place to use it. And from there, people opt in. Hopefully you have a lead magnet that helps, continue that relationship. If they're not ready to take that direct call to action, they can download a PDF, get on your email list, and you continue to nurture that relationship with them, pulling from the messages you put in your brand script, that story. You could have one email talking about the success that you experience. You can have one email talking about, the problem that you solve, the problem that they're facing, and can continue to pull little bits and pieces from that brand script. It's sort of like, I was a music teacher, so there are 7 different pieces. It's sort of like having 7 chords on a guitar. You get them really clear and really good at sharing those messages, and then you put them together in all different combinations and make music so that people want to come listen. But lots of ways to use it.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. All right, so you've also been involved, as we mentioned before, in launching these New York Times bestselling books, successful podcasts. Could you share maybe some kind of like case where the more narrative-based marketing played a role in achieving that kind of outcome, or what did that even look like for, like, how would you apply that kind of narrative-based marketing to a podcast, for example?
Yeah. So great question. I do have, one of my clients is, like you said, a New York Times bestselling author. And it was really great to step in and start working with her on launching this book. She has a really clear vision of who she's trying to help and the problem she's trying to solve and the problem that the book solves. And so as we were creating marketing for that book, making sure the website at the top talked about, this is the book this problem solves. If you have this problem, this book is for you. Making sure all of the social media spoke to that transformation the book was going to help them achieve. And we're just really clear, just repeating ourselves over and over and over again about how if you can learn how to, it was about fighting fear, basically, that you can show up and fight fear and get past it. And just talking about what life would be like when you get past that fear was really, really instrumental in helping her get the sound bites she needed to talk about the book in a way that helped people understand it really was for them. So, she'd previously hit the New York Times list, but she hit at a higher, like she was a number 3 this time instead of like number 9. I think she was the first time. And a lot of it really was that clear message that we kept repeating again and again and again, leading people through that exercise and memorization that made the difference in people picking up the book and picking up the book for other people too, wanting to, give it as a gift to help others who were struggling. So, that's one example for a book, but I've seen it work for everything from like landscaping to chiropractic care to online courses. If you understand who your customer is, what problem they're facing, and you can position what you're selling as a solution to that problem, make it clear to them that you're showing up as a guide for them, that you have a plan for them, and you know where they're trying to go. It just really helps people come follow where you're headed and join you as the guide and then them as the hero.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I know for myself, I'm not sure if I am maybe the perfect example of this or not, but I can at least share that what I feel has been useful and my lens of looking at this is I know who my customer is, and my job here,
Mhm.
like on this podcast, is to figure out if like it's I have to go and get all the answers that I can for my customer. So my customer can't be sitting here asking me those questions. So I have to think, what's all the things that they need to know? And like, oh,
Yeah.
if Macy says something, but that's going to leave like this other thing that I'm still curious about, how can I make sure that I get that answer as well? So that way they can get to their next stage. And also adding into that though as well, things that I might be curious about because
Mhm.
if I'm curious about it, probably other people are as well. So that's kind of my
Absolutely.
lens in looking at that, and I think that could be applied in a similar way to others doing something similar.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, I've got one more question for you, and on the show we
Great.
like to ask each of our guests to ask a question to the audience. So if you could ask anything to our audience, whether it's something you're curious about, something that you kind of want to get everybody thinking about, what would that be?
That is a good question. So I would say I think it you'll start to see this in the marketplace if you pay attention. There are brands and products and there's just any number of things competing for our attention. But if you look at the brands that are doing well, if you look at your favorite brands, maybe take a look at how they are utilizing narrative marketing. How are they showing up and solving a problem for you? How are they inviting you into a story of transformation? I look at a lot of course creators out there who do a really, really good job with this of saying, I've been where you are. I understand what you're feeling. I know this is where you want to go. I know you're feeling this problem and it's keeping you from getting the result that you want. Here's how I can help you. And here's the thing you need to do to get that help, the course you need to buy, the thing you need to purchase. If you take a step back, you'll see this in a lot of the ways that brands and companies operate. So just pay attention to that, and then once you start to see it, you can start to reverse engineer what makes that memorable and compelling. So I would just ask you to maybe to do that, to pay attention to that, because it's really, really cool to see it in use, and I think it would help inform your marketing. And I just, it's kind of more of an ask than a question, but paying attention to that I think is going to make you a better marketer when it comes to getting your courses in the hands of the people who really need to make that transformation that you sell.
Awesome. Great. All right. Well, Macy, thanks so much. Before we get going, where else can people find you online?
Well, I'm on social everywhere at Macy Robison, MacyRobison. Happy to connect on LinkedIn or on Instagram. I'm on Threads, any of those socials. But I think, the best thing to do if you're really interested in this is to take a look at writing your own brand script. You can, like I said, you can go to storybrand.com/brand script or storybrand.com/makeover if you want to see how that can apply to collateral. Or, I have a certification filled with over 600 guides all over the globe who, if you don't want to do this yourself, can come along and walk alongside you, help you co-create the story for your company, for your course, for your brand, to help you reach the people you're trying to reach. So you can go to marketingmadesimple.com to find those folks, and really appreciate the chance to talk about this and be here today. This is awesome.
All right. Thanks so much, Macy.
Thank you.